you watch Childish Gambino's new video, This Is America, you'll understand exactly why it went viral. The internet has spent the weekend trying to decipher the meaning in this video. I have one story you gotta know for Tuesday, January 23rd.
On this episode of True Story, it's the fatal police shooting you may have never even heard about.
What do you want the country to know about gun violence?
Getting the gun is easy as going to the store.
The Women's Convention was about bringing women together to actually strategize. So I saw women learning how to write speeches, how to plan to run for office.
When city leaders canceled a rally here at the Liberty Pole after the decision in the Michael Brown case, the leaders of Black stepped up and took over.
You have friends like Maxine Waters, Dorothy Pittman Hughes, Flo Kennedy. What have Black feminists taught you?
Feminism.
I think the children are almost shaming the adults into action. When an 11-year-old child can articulate why they should be able to go to school without thinking about bullets flying through the classroom. Cliff, the man with the plan, the man with the voice, why is it important for you to be a part of this movement?
We understand that Black youth have been protesting for gun reform now for many years.
It's probably the coldest day so far this winter in New York City. We're in Harlem getting ready to talk to Eric Alvarez. He was freed early from prison by President Obama.
Them releasing me,
right
this
here?
is the letter.
Wow. You are giving us a character who's idealistic in a lot of ways. He's a fighter. Why do you think we need a character like this?
I don't know. Why do you think we need a character?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like he's almost an imperfect hero, right? He's a freedom fighter. He believes in justice, and he's in a system that's working against him.
And I'm stealing that answer and using that now.
Ruffled some feathers. Was there ever a point where you felt challenged or you wanted to give up?
There was a little bit something different about my approach.
You actually have the ear of the president, President Donald Trump. And from what I read, you met with him in February to talk a little bit about infrastructure. How did that meeting go?
America has a D. I've been graded a D by the American Society of Civil Engineers.
We saw paramedics in an ambulance rushing off, the police asking us to actually step away as far back as possible so that they could put up this crime scene tape. I'm going to step back so you can see the scene behind me. I have to go back to the question of Donald Trump. Hundreds of thousands of women coming out and marching in the wake of his election. What do you think women have to do to keep that energy?
Since the election, I have never seen so much activism in my whole life.
It took us 50 years to get federal oversight over corrupt policing in this town. And where the accountability piece is so high and so difficult for us to get over our trust issues, because where we need accountability the most is where we get it the less. And that's when they kill us. When they kill us, there is no accountability.
Sometimes I feel like people in the community forget that I'm coming to the scene to help. But as soon as one police officer does something bad, every good thing that I've ever done has been swept under the rug. And I'm always seen as a negative light. Just because I'm a police officer.
I don't know how sustainable it is for us to keep marching down the road that we're marching on.
In Newark, New Jersey, a critical experiment is taking place, putting police officers in the same room with citizens to hear each other out.
Part of my relationship with law enforcement, the ones that weren't my coaches, is I don't answer any questions at all. So the war on drugs has been a barrier to me being a young single parent and me ushering my son into, this trusting goodwill relationship with law and community.
The training is part of a grant given to Equal Justice USA to teach police officers and civilians about how trauma impacts their day-to-day life.
Substance abuse, right? Risky behavior, depression, suicidal thoughts, might the same behavior we're identifying as lazy, as being bad parents, what's wrong with you, be linked to trauma.
Over the course of 1 month, the group meets, watches videos, works in teams, and has real talk about what they see on the job and in the streets.
Part of the reason I'll never be able to see you as the individual beyond you being the police officer that's present is because you're not my neighbor. I'm not saying you specifically, but because you're not my neighbor. So I wonder about your depth of your commitment and whether or not you can address the trauma because you don't see the trauma's impact as a community member.
So it becomes dangerous for my kids and I. If I'm arresting these criminals out here, they know me, they start knowing my kids. So I'm not gonna put my kids in danger just because you want me to feel what you feel. I see it every day what you guys go through. I work in Newark and I lived here.
I'm hearing a barrier to trust in the community is not having proximity, having closeness.
Right.
So it's not to say you shouldn't have done what you've done.
My job right.
Right,
to do
you're
my
doing,
job right, my kids, my family have to be
cared for. You're reacting to the trauma that's happening in communities that, again, it's not just acute trauma and chronic trauma, but it's historical trauma.
Last year, the Justice Department ordered Newark police to reform, citing evidence of unconstitutional practices from excessive force to theft by officers. Zaid Muhammad is a longtime activist who says only one change will help some community members trust again.
Constantly being killed innocently in spectacle fashion nowadays even, and there's no accountability. How can you expect a community to be loyal and to be trusting?
Many of the officers at the training are sympathetic to community frustrations.
I think that the training not only can help me, but I think that it should be, everyone should be trained like this because sometimes we forget, we disassociate ourselves and you can't disassociate yourself from the community because if you do, you can't work with the community.
I didn't feel attacked at all. It's like everybody has their own opinion. Just like I have my own opinion, the citizens have their own opinion. At least I can hear the feedback as far as what the citizens need, what they dislike as far as the officers.
During the training, officers opened up about on-the-job trauma, describing traveling from violent crime scene to crime scene and having a hard time forgetting what they saw.
And you have to look in the mirror every day. Did I do the right thing today? Did I do the right thing today? Am I going to do the right thing today? Am I all right to do the right thing today? Right. You have to self-check.
Why can't you, through your union or whatever, demand that these kind of resources, whatever kind of resources you all need, mental health days, retreats, whatever, because we empathize and understand that you have the most dangerous job, one of the most dangerous jobs in the world.
So we're back for the third week of training, and what you see right now is folks are presenting how they would respond, keeping trauma in mind whenever they encounter violence. So police and community members are coming together to make sure that they present solutions.
The training has broken some walls, but to build bridges, the work is just getting started.
I feel really happy that I took this training with all of you. We're humans, so just because of this uniform, we're still just like you.
All this other stuff about the double shifts and all that other kind of stuff and the traumas and not having any downtime has really, helped me change the way I look at your job.
That's how we break the cycle, by teaching this. We go to the North Public Schools, we go to the high schools, the universities, all across the planet, and we teach this.
Was there anything that you heard from the officers who participated in this program that makes you think they're going to go about policing differently? Did you feel heard by them?
They're human beings in the end, and they were forced to confront their own human limitations in their professional environment, the lack of support that they absolutely need to protect their humanness in their professional environment, and what they have to confront that is bigger than them, and that is the historical legacy of racism in this country that particular institution has been the principal arm for. If they can learn that and incorporate that into their personal lives and their personal approaching, then they won't be the ones that'll be killing us.
A 30-year prison sentence for selling drugs.
The lifestyle becomes addictive. It becomes more addictive than the drug that you're actually selling.
Years of his life lost behind bars, and a family left behind. Then a presidential commutation.
The White House.
More than 1,700 federal inmates were freed from prison under President Obama, who issued more commutations than any other president in history during his 8 years in office.
In far too many cases, the punishment simply does not fit the crime.
For those lucky men and women who met the criteria, a commutation meant hope. But what's the future of criminal justice reform under the Trump administration? And once someone is free, how do they make the most of their second chance? It's the snowiest day so far this year, and I'm in Harlem, New York to meet Eric Alvarez. Hey, Mr. Alvarez, this is Natasha.
Okay, I'm right outside. I got you.
Eric is spending his first New Year at home in 17 years.
It's overwhelming. It's like sometimes it don't even feel real.
In the year 2000, Eric was sentenced to 30 years in prison for conspiracy to distribute cocaine and crack and conspiracy to commit money laundering. Eric admits he ran a small drug ring that operated in New York and North Carolina, evading police for 2 years before turning himself in. He eventually signed a plea deal for what he thought would be a 15-year prison sentence. But after Eric signed, prosecutors added sentencing enhancements to his charges based upon allegations from non-testifying informants who had themselves been arrested. The guidelines for Eric's mandatory time served jumped to 30 years to life. According to Eric's lawyer, if sentenced today in federal court, he would have likely gotten 17 and a half years or less.
I'm guilty. I don't want nobody to ever think that I'm sitting here saying I'm not guilty. I'm guilty. But to be 30 years guilty was just not fair.
I want you to think back to that day that you were in the courtroom and you learned that the son that you loved was being sentenced to 30 years behind bars. What was your reaction?
All I could do was just stand there and look out the window. Looking all, I don't even remember what I was thinking or whatever, but I was just looking.
Eric would spend the next 17 years in 5 different prisons along the East Coast, his family traveling to each location to see him. But just a few years after Eric left for prison, his 14-year-old son, Eric Jr., was killed in a tragic subway accident.
You incarcerated and they call you up to the chapel to tell you that your only child has passed away. I don't wish that on nobody.
But Eric found hope again when his sister Haiti suggested that he had a strong case for clemency. Over the course of 2 years, Eric worked on his case, applying first for a regular pardon, then eventually teaming up with a lawyer from the nonprofit Clemency Project 2014 to request a presidential pardon. In June of 2016, he got to make the call home.
He says, I'm coming home. And then at that point, I couldn't speak anymore.
That don't make it official. Them releasing me,
right
this
here?
is the letter.
Wow. The White House, Washington.
Yeah, look, you even got that little logo there. I don't think nobody could just print that out.
After spending the required time in a halfway house, he moved into his parents' home.
He comes home every day, he hugs me and he gives me a kiss.
Oh, like this?
Yeah.
Today, Eric works as a runner in New York, helping mechanics transport equipment all over the city. At 50 years old, he's rebuilt his life, relearning how to drive, and has once again picked up a hobby he loved before prison. But not everyone's clemency story turns out so well. One recipient recently made headlines after getting arrested on a new drug charge. The Bureau of Justice Statistics has found high recidivism rates across the country. One study showing about a third of federal prisoners return to prison within 5 years of being released on probation. Professor Boz Dreisinger studies what keeps ex-inmates from returning to prison.
Jobs and housing are the critical thing. I think those who have the most family support tend to have often the most successful reentries. There are so many intangibles, though, in terms of one's sort of psychological strength and resiliency in coming home.
As of late January, almost 3,500 clemency petitions from drug offenders are still pending. And while there has been bipartisan support for some criminal justice reform, whether it will be a priority in this White House is unclear.
A new era of justice begins, and it begins right now.
President Trump's newly appointed Attorney General Jeff Sessions has argued the benefits of mandatory minimums.
When somebody's facing a 10-year sentence, mandatory minimum, and they know it, and they're not going to go before the judge and talk their way out of it, it makes a difference. To suggest otherwise, I think, is incorrect.
The mandatory minimums is absolutely devastating for our prison system, and it's devastating for the cause of reducing the prison population. When we keep people in that long, we are not serving any good.
She says this is especially true for state prisoners. More than half of them return to prison within 5 years of a probation release.
The bulk of the reforms that really have to happen on the state level and not the federal level.
I believe in your ability to prove the doubters wrong. and change your life for the better. So good luck and Godspeed. And he signed it. I'm working, I'm doing everything I can to put my life back in order. And this is just the beginning.